This happened in Dallas, and it happened to me. I'm an older woman who's spent most of her life keeping other people's shelves and lives in neat lines. But this is the one story that unspooled those lines and stitched them back stronger. At the Highland Park Village Valet under the green awning, the same twins who filmed my sputtering Camry and posted it for the whole PDA to laugh at saw me roll up in a black Cadillac Escalade ESV. The exact one their father had just lost in bankruptcy. The keys were hot in my palm, the title folded in my purse, and the scent of warmed leather rose as clean as a confession. We were all gathered for the Spring Arts fundraiser in the Village Theater, where the valet queue snakes passed me cocina and the Henry's patio chatter. Their laughter died when the valet opened my door, and I stepped out in my thrift store heels like I owned the street, which for one bright second I did. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I'll start at the beginning, back when my car coughed and stuttered like a smoker clearing her throat after church. I'm Elaine, 57, a librarian at Woodrow Wilson High off Glasgow Drive in East Dallas. The kind of woman who writes book donor names in careful block letters and remembers which freshman boys can't find their homework because it's really their aunt's second job swallowing their evenings. I live in a tiny duplex near Lakewood, a window unit humming like a cricket, and I drive a 2007 Toyota Camry with a back bumper held by zip ties and determination. I met the Winthrop twins, Sloan and Avery, at a PDA craft fair that sprawled across the gym like somebody dropped Etsy on a basketball court. They were 21 and looked like they'd been printed by a high-end machine. Lashes for days, glossy hair in roundhouse curls, voices bright as coins. Their mother, Bryn, chaired the committee the way some people lead armies. She wore white jeans that never caught dust, and a smile that didn't include me. The power of Highland Park old money is that it can smell what you earn. I run a small side business on weekends, Elaine's order, part cleaning and part staging. I make homes look like someone who reads lives there. A realtor friend sends me clients. When the Winthrops bought a house on Drexel Drive to flip, a faux Tudor with modern fixtures and a pool shaped like a comma, Bryn hired me to stage it for an open house. We agreed on $700 for the weekend, cash or Venmo by end of Sunday. I put in 12 straight hours making their empty rooms glow like a promise. On Sunday night, as I rolled my vacuum cord, the twins and their friends clustered near the kitchen island. Champagne flutes clinked. Someone talked about a trip to Cabo. My Camry parked at the curb looked like a dent in the block's perfection. When I knocked on the marble with my knuckles and asked about the payment, Bryn's smile tightened. "We're a little cash light until next week," she said, flipping her hair like a curtain over the word light. "We'll get you then." She used the plural like money lived in a different room and would join us when it felt social. On Tuesday, still unpaid, I ran to mi cocina in Highland Park Village for chips and a bowl of legendary queso. In the heat, my Camry's radiator groaned. The twins and two boys in SMU sweatshirts stood near the valet, laughing at memes on someone's phone. When I turned the key, the car coughed and died. I tried again. The engine clicked like a dryer with coins in it. Across the pavement, my name floated. Elaine, riding someone's laughter. I looked up. Sloan had her iPhone lifted. "Try it again," she called, laughing. "Maybe sing to it." When the car finally caught, the hood shivered like a kicked dog. I backed out red-faced, and the group cheered as if they'd trained me to perform a trick. The next day, a video appeared on TikTok. "Dallas Village Vibes," the caption read. My Camry sputtered on loop, zoomed in on the mismatched right fender I could never afford to paint. A girl's voice, Avery or Sloan, said, "When your librarian moonlights as a NASCAR pit crew," and a chorus of laughter followed. They used a filter that made my face, caught in the reflection of the windshield, look warped and small. 100 laughing comments, then 200, then the PDA mom sent it in a group text with laughing crying emojis. I put my phone in a drawer and told myself it was fine. Embarrassment is a house without load-bearing walls if you refuse to lean on it. That Thursday night, I worked a school board meeting at Dallas ISD headquarters on Ross Avenue, handing out agendas while the superintendent droned. After, as I was locking the library, the principal, Mr. Bell, leaned in the doorway. "Saw a video today," he said gently, like he was offering me a Kleenex. "Kids can be cruel." He didn't say, "Donors can be cruel," but I heard it. The Winthrops gave. People like me shelved. I was old enough to know humiliation is the cheapest currency in rich neighborhoods. But I was also old enough to know something else. Money borrows arrogance on credit, and debt always shows itself somewhere. The somewhere, with the Winthrops, was the thick stack of FedEx letters that started appearing at the Drexel house whenever I drove past. Big legal envelopes, the kind printed with polite threat. I saw one slip from the hand of a man in a navy suit on a Friday morning, and because librarians read every piece of paper their eyes touch, I saw the return address: Earl Cabell Federal Building and Courthouse. Bankruptcy. I'd learned about bankruptcy in the same place I learned how to replace a radiator hose. YouTube, and a lifetime of necessity. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew that when somebody rich says they're cashlight, sometimes they're actually wearing a cement vest labeled Chapter 11. That night, I signed up for Pacer, the federal court records portal, and for 10 cents a page, I stepped into the Winthrops' house without knocking. Case caption: Winthrop Development Group, LLC and Charles A. Winthrop 3 debtors. Counsel: Haynes and Boone on one side, a court-appointed trustee on the other. I clicked filings like I was turning pages no one meant me to read. The first document that mattered to me was a Schedule A of B, assets. I skimmed the lines: the Drexel house underwater, a ranch in Fort Worth in dispute, a ski boat at Cedar Creek Lake, uninsured, and motor vehicles. There it was: 2019 Cadillac Escalade ESV, black, custom quilted leather, VIN ending in 3842. I saw it everywhere near the village. The twins in the back, father at the wheel, windows dark as secrets. The Cadillac wasn't just a car, it was a moving room where I didn't exist. Now it was listed with a number next to it I understood: fair market value. And below that, subject to lien. Bank of Texas had their name on it like a brand. If the trustee forced a sale, the equity, if any, would trickle to creditors. My $700 wasn't on that list. Not yet. I read a motion set for a hearing on Tuesday. Motion to use cash collateral, motion to sell certain non-essential assets. The trustee wanted to liquidate toys to keep the skeleton of the company walking while they sorted the mess. The judge's name rang familiar: Judge Harlan D. Hale, a man with a gavel and the patience to hear 100 sad stories before lunch. The hearing location sent a thrill down my spine: Earl Cabell Federal Building and Courthouse, 1100 Commerce Street. I knew the plaza outside. I'd taken a civics class on a field trip there once, ushering students in to sit still and witness government. I decided to witness this. On Tuesday morning, I took the dart and walked under the white ribs of the Earl Cabell atrium, feeling the kind of sober that makes you count your own steps. Lawyers in navy suits hummed through security like an efficient species. I slipped into the bankruptcy courtroom and sat on a wooden bench. The carpet smelled expensive, the clock didn't. On my left, a woman with a laptop whispered, "I'm the trustee's assistant, you?" "A librarian," I said, and she smiled as if that explained my curiosity, which it did. The Winthrops sat at counsel table. Charles wore a blazer that tried too hard. Bryn wore a scarf that didn't have to try at all. The twins slid into the back row, chewing gum like time owed them favors. When the trustee argued that the Escalade was an unnecessary business expense and a liquid asset, Bryn hissed audibly. The judge lifted his eyes, an expression I'd seen from principals, from mothers in church, from anyone who's had an entire town's arrogance set in front of him at 10 a.m. "Order," he said, and it fell. The order that followed allowed the sale of certain vehicles, if buyers could be found at or near appraised value. The trustee's assistant slid me a card when the hearing adjourned. "If you come across any interested parties," she said, "we're working with Lone Star Auctioneers. And if you've got a claim, service providers, contractors, file it. Small claims can be the difference between groceries and indignity." I thumbed the card like a rosary that afternoon. I had not forgotten my 700. And I had not forgotten that video. That night, the twins posted a boomerang, white wine glasses against sunset, captioned, "Late summer never ends in HP." But the season was changing, whether Instagram admitted it or not. One of my seniors, Tari, works part-time at a valet company that handles the Village and the Crescent Court Hotel on Maple Avenue. He's the kind of kid who sees everything because no one looks at him directly. "Ms. M," he said the next day, dropping a stack of late-return paperbacks on my desk. "You see that Escalade? It comes in quiet now, like they tip with smiles instead of bills." Every small humiliation in my life had taught me a language. The way people who think they're unavoidable switch to acting invisible when the lights dim. I decided, in that quiet, to write my own captions. I filed my proof of claim with the court. The 700 for staging, plus late fees according to the simple contract, I kept in a folder for just such disrespect. Then I found Lone Star Auctioneer's page. The black Escalade ESV was listed with photos taken behind a chain-link fence off a frontage road in Irving. The car looked like a house that still believed it would be bought by someone charming. The opening bid was $20,000. I calculated. I had $9,800 in savings, a bulwark against water heaters and hospital copays. I had a credit union willing to lend me 10 at an ungentle interest rate if I could show steady income, which I could. And I had a friend, Ian, a math teacher, who'd once told me that sometimes the cruelest thing you can do to a bully is survive long enough to show them you did. I registered for the auction. I could almost hear the Camry murmuring in the duplex carport at night, brave and tired. I put a paper towel under it to catch the slow drip of something that had the color of old tea. The auction date landed on a Saturday, the same day as the school's fall carnival. The irony tasted perfect, like salted caramel. It would mean missing the cakewalk and the dunk tank and the PDA gossip swirling across the blacktop. I knew the twins would be there in matching denim. I knew if I won, I would meet them later under that green awning, one world handed to another by a man in a valet vest. I knew, too, that you don't walk into a pleasure like that without preparing for a cost. I clicked the place bid button for my first time and felt a heartbeat in my wrist. 3 bids later, a new user with a number instead of a name came in heavy, driving the price to 24. I raised to 25, then stopped. I could spend my whole life trying to make rich people notice me, or I could spend it once to make them choke on the noticing. I closed the laptop and paced the living room. On TV, a cooking show host salted a steak like a ritual. I brewed tea, hands steady. 5 minutes before the auction closed, I refreshed and saw the number user again. 26. The difference between me and them was that my dollars were counted by hours, not by a father's bank. But then a line from the docket rose in my mind like a thread in a sweater. Sale subject to confirmation. Bankruptcy estate reserves the right to reject bids not in the best interest of the estate. The trustee didn't just want high bids, he wanted clean ones. I called the assistant whose card I'd kept. "If I'm a creditor and a bidder," I said, "does it matter?" She paused, then said, "It matters that you'll actually pick up the car and pay on time and not make us chase you." My bid was a promise. The other users might be a bluff. I refreshed again, typed 27, and hit enter. The countdown ticked, my Camry's clock light glowed in the driveway through the curtain, and my bid held. A week later, I stood at a lot in Irving holding a cashier's check and a title application that still smelled like ink. A man handed me the fob and stepped back like I'd just adopted an animal that used to bite. I sat behind the wheel and adjusted a seat so soft I thought it might whisper my name. The engine woke like a low apology. I drove to a gas station on Northwest Highway and filled the tank while a woman in leggings stared as if cars could commit adultery. I took the long way home up Turtle Creek, past the hotel where the valets spin dreams indoors, past the Village where a valet kid, maybe Tari, would have caught the flash of black and chrome and thought, oh. When I parked behind my duplex, the Escalade shadowed my Camry like a bigger sister. I rested my palm on the Camry's hood. "You got me here," I said out loud because cars, like people, do better when someone thanks them. The next morning I set the title transfer in motion at the Dallas County Tax Office on Oak Cliff Boulevard and bought plates that didn't apologize for me. My name on the paper. My hands on the wheel. For years, I'd made spaces look like they belonged to someone else. Now something belonged to me that had once belonged to people who wanted me to be invisible. News gets around like a rumor falling downstairs. Within 2 days, a screenshot of the auction listing and the words sold, buyer confidential started pinging around group texts. At the carnival, while teachers shepherded toddlers toward cotton candy, I heard Escalade whispered like a weather front. Bryn caught my eye across the dunk tank, and the smile she sent me was the kind people send when they're deciding whether it's worth pretending they still own you. That same afternoon, my proof of claim posted on the docket. Then another document, a dull-sounding notice of possible asset concealment, lit up like a flare. Someone, anonymous tipster, they said, had reported that a certain ski boat, supposedly inoperative, had been seen skimming across Cedar Creek Lake the previous weekend like nothing broken ever happened. The trustee filed a motion, the judge signed it, the U.S. Marshals did the rest. The case shifted from Chapter 11 reorganization to talk of Chapter 7 liquidation. When big men with bigger boats pretend items are in storage, the law gets curious the way my librarian heart always is. I had been at Cedar Creek with my sister once, last summer, and snapped a photo of a black and blue boat whose registration matched a line item in Schedule A/B. I label everything. I had labeled the image. I sent the tip. I will not apologize. The Monday before the village fundraiser, I dressed with an attention I usually reserve for funerals. Thrifted black dress, little gold earrings, the heels that had waited in my closet for news worth standing tall for. I drove the Escalade up Mockingbird Lane and slid into the valet queue as if God had put those lanes there for me. When Tari opened my door, he grinned like he'd gotten to keep a secret longer than anyone expected. "Looks good on you, Ms. M," he said. "Looks earned," I said back, and he laughed the way kids laugh when they're truly glad someone they like is finally okay. The twins arrived with a cluster of friends whose cologne announced them. Their eyes hit the Escalade and bounced like birds into glass. "That's," Sloane said, then froze. "No, it's not." Avery's mouth made an O that wasn't for surprise alone. It was for the realization that some doors close so hard the sound sticks to your skin. "Nice car," Bryn said, words flat as a kitchen counter. "I like your scarf," I replied and walked. The valet handed me the claim ticket, as if I'd always had it. Inside the theater lobby, beneath the gilded ceiling and the smell of popcorn older than some marriages, I stood with a pastor's wife and a math teacher and pretended to discuss raffle baskets. The Winthrops held their smiles together with effort you could see. A bell chimed for seating, and the crowd poured through velvet curtains. My phone buzzed. A private number. I let it buzz, then buzz again. On the third try, I answered in the dim. Charles Winthrop's voice carried the tone of a man who never calls the help unless he needs the help to pretend something. "You bought my car," he said, as if I'd stolen a family heirloom from his mantelpiece. "I bought a car from a bankruptcy estate," I corrected. "It belonged to your creditors before me. I'm just the next librarian in line." "That vehicle has sentimental value," he said, and I imagined the word sentimental slipping a ring off someone else's finger and trying it on. "Sell it back to me," he said. "Cash." The stage lights flickered through the velvet, signaling the show about to start. "I'm not sentimental," I said gently. "I'm practical." There was a long silence in which something cracked and fell in a house that did not belong to me. "You'll be sorry," he said, the 4 words that men like him believe are spells. "I already was," I said, and hung up as the orchestra swelled. During intermission on the lobby's terrazzo, I felt a chill that wasn't the air conditioning. 2 men in navy approached, counsel faces. "Ms. Martinez?" one asked. "We represent Mr. Winthrop. He believes there may have been irregularities in the sale." People around us pretended not to listen. I held their gaze until they glanced away. Then I said, "The trustee confirmed it. Any issues should go through the court." Simple, clean, like a return policy spoken by someone who's tired of being intimidated by fonts on letterhead. They retreated, leaving a square of cooler air where their confidence had been standing. Outside after the show, the foyer emptied in a glitter of perfume and chirping key fobs. I handed Tari my ticket and watched the twins pretend to search for their ride like they hadn't waited for a driver their entire lives. When the Escalade nosed up, smooth as a breath, I saw Charles across the patio, jaw coiled, phone to his ear. "Enjoy the car," a mom from the chess team said, winking. The twins flanked me like bookends. "He's going to get it back," Sloane whispered. "Everything you people have," Avery added. "We can buy it twice." I looked at them the way librarians look at children who believe book spines decide what's inside. "Then why didn't you buy it once?" I asked. And because I am older and have learned the pleasure of leaving a room with a sentence still between us, I smiled and slid into my seat. The door thumped shut, sealing me in my own small country. That night, instead of going home, I drove downtown while the Bank of America Plaza's green outline lit up like an idea. I parked near the Records building and walked the 2 blocks to a bar on Commerce where teachers drink cheap wine and the bartender knows their names. Ian already had a stool and 2 glasses. "You look like you pulled a sword from a stone," he said. "I pulled it from a file," I said, which in my world is how swords happen. "They'll come for you," he warned gently. "Rich men come for what they can't imagine living without." "I've lived without it," I said. "I have more practice." A week later, a packet arrived from the bankruptcy court. A notice of conversion to Chapter 7, a trustee substitution, instructions for asset examination. Folded inside, a copy of my proof of claim marked allowed, and a small check, a partial distribution from the sale of non-exempt personal property. It wasn't much, but it had a memo line that felt like a spell: payment to Elaine's order. I pinned it to my corkboard before cashing it, so I could look at it for a day and taste a slow victory. Then came the real war. The Winthrops filed an emergency motion alleging collusion in the sale of the Escalade. Their lawyers attached screenshots of my Pacer activity, as if reading were a crime. The trustee answered with a timeline: my bid, the confirmation, the payment, the title transfer, the chain of custody logged like a librarian logs circulation. A hearing was set. I took a half-day off, wore my church dress, and sat in the back of the courtroom with a posture that said I had no secrets worth hiding. On the stand, the trustee spoke like paper could testify. "We received an anonymous tip regarding concealment of a boat," he said, "which led to discovery of additional unlisted assets." He never looked at me, and I appreciated that discretion like a blanket. The judge listened, fingertips steepled. When the Winthrops counsel attempted to suggest that bad faith had stalked the sale, the judge's eyebrows rose. "Bad faith usually runs with money, not away from it," he said dryly. He denied their motion. On the way out, a reporter from the Dallas Morning News asked for a comment. I kept walking. I am not a story where I can be quoted and put back on a shelf. You'd think the twins would have grown quiet. They didn't. They switched tactics, which is to say, they stopped laughing to my face and started whispering behind my back. Tari told me a story from the Crescent. He'd overheard them telling a new valet that I'd stolen a car, how pathetic it was that a woman that age needed a status symbol. I am older. Their words glanced off a skin that has known worse. But words have a way of wriggling under a collar and making you scratch. So I kept receipts and I made plans. I filed a small claims suit in Dallas County Justice of the Peace, Precinct 3, for my unpaid $700 plus court costs. I sent service to the registered agent for Winthrop Development Group. They didn't show for the hearing. Default judgment entered in my favor, ink crisp as a fresh paperback. I recorded it. Texas is notorious about wage garnishment, but bank accounts? Those are different when a sheriff's deputy walks in with a writ. I didn't need their money. I needed their attention in a language they spoke. I copied the judgment to the trustee with a note. Creditor claim attached. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji that made me laugh in my kitchen. The next fundraiser, the Winter Gala, was at Hotel Crescent Court. The ballroom smelled like lilies and old promises. I parked the Escalade beneath the porte-cochere and watched other cars reflected in its flanks like fish. The twins wore sequins like a dare. Bryn's earrings caught the light like time crawling toward closing arguments. Charles didn't attend. He had a hearing the next morning on sanctions. The U.S. trustee had a tone even richer men respect. Midway through dessert, the MC announced the raffle winner for a weekend at the Jewel. My name. The crowd clapped. The twins clinked glasses as if applause were contagious. When the lights shifted to blue for dancing, Bryn approached the edge of the floor. "You've made your point," she said, as if I were late putting books back and now the bell had rung. "Give the car back. We'll make you whole." Her smile was a receipt she wanted me to sign without reading. "You still owe me $700, I said. "Plus costs." "We're dealing with a lot," she said. "Be gracious." I leaned in so only she could hear. "Gracious would have been paying me when you said you would. Gracious would have been telling your daughters not to turn a woman's one car into a joke. Gracious would be leaving me alone." She blinked, and for a second I watched a girl inside her shrug a coat off her shoulders and forget where she'd put it. "Enjoy your night," I added, and the way she flinched told me I'd chosen the right sentence to leave her with. Outside, I stood at the top of the hotel steps and watched Dallas glitter like a book whose pages keep catching the same light. Tari whistled the Escalade forward. The twins stood near the fountain, pretending to wait for a rideshare. "Hey," Sloane called, voice smaller than it wanted to be. We're sorry." Avery stared at her shoes. The apology hit the air like a receipt printed after a store has closed. "I won't be your movie again," I said. "Find another channel." Sloane's eyes filled, and I felt suddenly tired. They were cruel because it was easy, and I was cruel because it was mine. I got in my car. Weeks later, the final blow landed not with drama, but with ordinary paperwork. An order converting the case to Chapter 7. A trustee's report that read like the slow draining of a pool. Asset sales. Distributions. Sanctions. Among the exhibits, a friendly photo of a boat that could not be inoperative if it skied children on weekends. The estate clawed back transfers. The Drexel house went on the market with a new sign. The twins moved into a smaller condo with exposed brick and a view partially obscured by an HVAC unit. Their father's Instagram grew quiet and then stopped. On a Saturday in spring, I met my sister at White Rock Lake. We walked the loop, waving at cyclists in hollow sunglasses, and stopped near the Bathhouse Cultural Center to watch the sailboats stitch the water. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was Sloane. "The car," it read. "How much to buy it?" I typed and erased and typed again. Then I put the phone in my pocket and watched a dog shake water from its fur, as if it could rid itself of everything heavy. That night, I polished the Escalade's hood with the cheap spray I use on laminate. I looked at the Camry, still faithful in the carport, a backup heart in the body of my days. I thought about the girls and their fear, about their mother and her refusal to let a sentence end if she could help it, about a man who believed the ledger of life started with his name. I thought about my students who take the dart at dawn, about Tari who runs hard toward classes and keeps a valet's poise in his pocket for when life tips. I thought about Judge Hale and the sound of a gavel compared to the sound of my Camry's engine catching, both decisive in their ways. The next morning, coffee in hand, I scrolled through real estate listings and paused on the Drexel house. It had new staging, pretty but soulless. Someone had placed a stack of vintage paperbacks on the island, attempting authenticity like a costume. I smiled, closed the app, and opened a spreadsheet where my name sat at the top of the column. I put in an extra payment on the credit union loan. I checked the balance and breathed. You might think the end of the story is me sliding into the village and watching the twins flinch, then bowing to applause. But villains don't melt, they just learn different faces. The ending I earned was quieter. The trustee's final report filed, my judgment satisfied out of a bank account nobody thought the sheriff would find. The Pacer account closed with a balance of 10 cents, I paid like an indulgence. The Escalade fits my life in ways I didn't expect, hauling library book donations, ferrying a neighbor with a bad knee to the VA on Lancaster, carrying my sister and 2 coolers to Cedar Creek. Yes, I waved at that dock as we passed. What I drove didn't change me. Getting to choose what I drove did. A month later, at dusk, I found myself again under the green awning at Highland Park Village. The valet nodded, muscle memory in his grin. I sat for a minute with the engine off and listened to the evening. The clink of glass, the grove of conversation, the flicker of a fountain. I looked at the keys in my hand, an ordinary shape made strange by what it meant. The twins walked by with paper cups of frozen custard, faces unpainted. They didn't see me. I watched them go and felt something like mercy slide into the space where anger had been. I turned the key and pulled away, the night opening like a book I wasn't afraid to read anymore. And in the side mirror I watched their world recede, as if distance itself had learned my name. The end.